During the same time period of Thales' reign over ancient Rome, restlessness grew once more in ancient Greece. The Spartans seeking to expand into the Argolis region would soon suffer defeat instead of achieving expected victory, and with it setting the stage for the Second Messenian War. With an united city-state of Argos now firmly established, the Spartans marched from their capital city with the aim of defeating the Argives. However, they encountered an unusual situation when they entered the neighboring city-state's territory. The Argive army was not waiting for them on an open field, but instead, Phidon had chosen to test his newly found phalanx formation in the streets of Assae. The Spartans, confident from their lack of major defeats for many years, let their overconfidence get the better of them, as they fell for the trap by rushing into the town. Once inside, they were forced to maneuver in tight spaces between the houses. Here they faced an enemy fighting in a tightly packed, well-organized and well-defended battle formation. The Argive shields were much larger than those of the Spartans and could easily be used to form a united front. The Spartans, inexperienced with facing the phalanx formation, were unable to break through the defenses and gradually got worn down by the Argives. As they gave it everything they had, they started to realize that victory might not be theirs on this day. Slowly but steadily, their army now got swallowed by the Argives. It wasn't long before the Spartans were forced to move back towards the city gate, after which the survivors routed back to their capital. Hearing the news of the Spartan defeat gave the Messenians a newfound purpose. The Messenian people had been living under Spartan rule ever since the First Messenian War, with most of them having been subjugated to the rank of Helot. Now, with the Spartans weakened after the battle against Argos, the Messenians felt ready to pounce. The Messenians faced the Spartan army at the Battle of the Res. This was most likely named after a small hill where the two armies would meet in battle. Despite previous encounters with the Spartans not going well for the Messenians, it was thought that this time was going to be different. With the Spartans weakened from their previous defeat, the battle constantly changed in favor of either side. However, as the losses started to mount, both armies eventually decided to withdraw before either could claim victory. The Messenians, being unable to defeat the Spartans, now turned to their newfound allies in order to try and finish what they had started. The Arcadians, willing to aid the Messenians, gathered their army, and together both armies marched to meet the Spartans once more. However, unbeknownst to the Messenians, it would turn out that their new ally was willing to sell its services to the highest bidder. With the two armies facing each other, Aristomenes of Messenia observed a growing unease amongst the Arcadian allied troops, who were positioned in the center of the formation. Despite his concerns, Aristomenes chose not to dwell on it, as the morale of his own army relied heavily on this alliance. He therefore brushed it off, as the Arcadians, realizing they would be facing the initial brunt of the Spartan war machine. Now the command to charge was issued by the Spartan troops, who were on the other side of the battlefield. As they began advancing towards the Messenians and Arcadians, the Messenian-Arcadian army also moved forward, getting ready for their own charge. Then something unexpected occurred. In a matter of seconds, Aristomenes realized that the Arcadian soldiers were not uneasy about the prospect of battle, but rather due to a secret deal that had been made between their king and the Spartan leaders. As the two armies closed in on each other, the Arcadian king Aristocrates signaled for his troops to turn around. The Spartans who had bribed the king had requested that he withdraw his men just as the battle was about to commence. The Arcadians retreated through the Messenian lines as the Spartans advanced forwards. The two armies moving in opposite directions caused widespread confusion amongst the Messenian troops, who struggled to maintain a cohesive battle line. The sloped terrain on either side didn't improve their situation. The morale of the Messenians quickly plummeted as the Arcadians disappeared into the distance. The remaining Messenian survivors, now facing the Spartans, decided to retreat. With this heavy loss for the Messenians, Sparta took their time to regroup and prepare for the final assault. With the Messenians retreated to one of their mountain fortresses, Sparta marched into Messenia. Little is understood about the exact circumstances of the Spartan victory. However, some accounts suggest that prior to the city's fall, the Spartans allowed the women and children to be freed, along with the men who had fought so valiantly, Aristomenes. Many of those who escaped fled to Italy, while Aristomenes himself traveled to the Greek island of Rhodes. The remaining survivors and citizens who were left behind were forced back into a life as helots under the Spartan rule. The defeat against Argos and the Helot uprising taught the Spartans a lesson. This would result into Sparta starting to show signs of adopting the militaristic way of living they are known for. During this process, they adopted the use of the Aspis shield and the famous phalanx formation. With the outcome of the Second Messenian War decided once again in favor of the Spartan army, we will leave ancient Greece behind for now and turn our attention once more towards Rome. Tullus Hostilius is no longer the king of Rome and has now been replaced by the city's fourth king, Ancus Marcius. With Marcius initially focusing on internal issues that required his attention, he would not be able to escape the growing tension across the Latian plain. A lot of this could be traced back to his predecessor Tullus Hostilius. After a joint group of Latin warriors had raided the Roman countryside and didn't want to pay for any reparations, Marcius declared war. Politorium would now become his target. Marcius assembled his Roman army and marched to confront the combined Latin forces outside the town of Politorium. Upon arrival, he ordered his men to establish a camp on the edge of town. A prolonged siege was not feasible for the Latin defenders, as their allies of the Latin League would not be able to arrive in time. Thus, they decided to engage the Romans on the battlefield. Marcius noticed the Latin army leaving the town and prepared his men for battle. Another clash between the Romans and their Latin neighbors was now inevitable. Intense fighting erupted between the two armies, with the Roman soldiers motivated by Marcius' vision to expand Roman influence, and the Latin tribes determined to defend their lands. But as the story is told, the Romans emerged victorious and proceeded to march into the town. As Rome sought to expand its territories, there was a plan in place once they conquered a people of a similar background as the Romans. The conquered town's residents of Politorium were therefore relocated to Rome and settled on the Aventine Hill as new citizens. After Marcius and his army had departed, the surrounding Latins repopulated Politorium. In response to this, the Roman army returned again to establish their dominance once and for all. This time, they not only conquered Politorium, but also completely destroyed it. This was followed by the towns of Telanae and Ficana. The final confrontation between Marcius and the Latins would occur at the town of Medallia. When the Romans arrived at Medallia, they established a camp and began to lay siege to the town. Confident in their strength, the Latin army decided to engage the Romans in battle. Both sides fought fiercely, with Marcius himself participating in the battle, as was customary for Roman kings at the time. At one point during the battle, the Romans seemed to gain the upper hand, but the Latin army managed to hold their ground under the intense pressure. They decided to retreat back into the town and did so in a well-organized manner, leaving the Romans no opportunity to gain the advantage by following them through the gates. Further engagements between the two armies took place over the following days. Although the Latins put up a stronger resistance this time, in the end they were unable to defeat Rome. The outcome was once again in favor of Ancus Marcius, as his army eventually gained control over Medallia. With Marcius having established the power of Rome within the Latian plain, it is time to make our way one final time towards ancient Greece. Here we arrive at the beginning of the 6th century BCE. This time though, it doesn't involve Sparta or the Messenians. For our final battle, we will make our way along the coast of what we know today as the Corinthian Gulf. With the port city of Caira cracking down on traveling pilgrims looking to visit the sacred precinct of Delphi, the Amphityonic League decided to take matters into their own hands. Based on the available information, it appears that at some point during the war, the Amphityonic League was successful in forcing the Carian population into their city and sealing off access from both land and through their harbor. Caira was now under siege, with Cleisthenes of Sicyon serving as the commander in charge. He was commanding the formidable navy that was blocking the harbor, while Eurylochus and Hippias led the land-based army. The Amphidyonic League was also backed by a group of Athenians under the leadership of Alcmaeon. With the city under siege, there was no escape for the inhabitants, yet they still held their ground against the invading forces. Cleisthenes, as the leader of the besieging army, was now in a strategic position with ample time to devise a cunning plan. Fate would favor him as an opportunity presented itself during one of the routine scouting missions. A group of horsemen, during what was supposed to be a standard patrol around the city's premises, stumbled upon a discovery. While riding their horses, it so happened that the hooves of one of their animals sunk straight into the ground. This revealed an, until then, unknown water pipe, apparently supplying the city with fresh water. What followed was possibly one of the earliest documented instances of chemical warfare in European history. In an effort to weaken the city's inhabitants, the Amphidyonic League devised a plan to poison the water supply by utilizing the toxic properties of the hellebore plant. With the contaminated water flowing into the city, all the Amphidyonic army had to do was wait for the inevitable. As the Kyrian population now drank the poisoned water, they started to lose their strength, and Cleisthenes' long-awaited moment finally arrived. With his navy still blocking the harbor, the command was given for the land-based army to invade the city. The defenders were no match for the invading forces, who swept over the walls and through the gates, leaving no street unsearched and no one unharmed. Many of the city's citizens and soldiers would not survive this onslaught of the battle before the Amphidyonic army finally claimed their victory. The goal of the Amphidyonic League was to restore the Holy Land of Delphi and provide access for any pilgrim who wished to visit the sacred temples. Those inhabitants of Kira who managed to escape the violence fled to the Kerpe mountain. However, Cleisthenes was not satisfied with just removing the people from the city. His army continued to destroy every building within these walls. With the last of our 15 oldest battlefields of Europe now behind us, it is time we look forward to what is to come. The complexities of history cannot be underestimated, but we can only deal with the information and sources available to us. After having dealt with the mostly internal conflicts across ancient Greece and ancient Italy, the next part of our story will see a well-known player of this time period join the stage. Who that might be, I leave up to you to figure out.